Welcome to episode 277 of Nurah Speaks, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast. This episode is part one in a series titled Know Your Numbers. What I'm specifically talking about are certain health values that we should know, that we should monitor, that we should be aware of. Far too often, we find ourselves in a health compromise or in a medical situation that had we monitored or were aware of our baseline numbers, our general numbers, we could either take corrective action, we could consult our physicians, and take some lifestyle changes that can really have significant impacts on our health. And the first one in this episode is glucose or our blood sugar. And I'll say that this series was inspired by several events recently. One, I was at a local event and there was free blood sugar and blood pressure monitoring. And when I saw the table, I sat down and I asked the lady, I said, "Have you had many people come over?" And she said, "You're only the third." And they had been out there for probably 2 hours at that point. And there were hundreds of people walking around in a park, and for me to have been only the third person to sit down, I thought, "Now that's just not good." And the predominant people there were Black people or African Americans. And so as she began checking my blood sugar and checking my blood pressure, I let her know, I said, "I'm going to try to rally some people to get over to you." And fortunately, I was able to get about 7 people over to her. But so many people said, "Oh, I know my blood pressure is high. Oh, I know." And I thought, but you don't know. You don't know unless you get it checked. And so I recall recently a friend of mine was in the hospital, and when her blood sugar was taken, it was a little elevated in the what's considered the pre-diabetes range. And, she asked the question, and the nurse was a gentleman. And because of my friend's age, the nurse said, "Well, it's typical, in your age group. It's common." Like, that's normal, but it's an elevated value. The number was high, and for a medical personnel to say, "Well, that's just normal," as if there's nothing to be concerned about, there's no actions you need to take. I said, "No, no, no, I don't accept that." Uh, and so while some things could be seen as normal, we need to know what's healthy, and we need to find ourselves in the healthy ranges and not just accept that because we're at a certain age or that we are a certain ethnicity or quote unquote race, then elevated blood sugar, elevated blood pressure, elevated weight, elevated cholesterol. Like, some things just come with the status of your race, the status of your gender, it the status of your socioeconomic status. That's just not acceptable to me. And because I know these health values play such a vital role in our overall health outcome, I wanted to share some of them with you. And so the first one that we're talking about is glucose, the blood glucose, or the how much sugar is in our blood. And we know that, some of our people have dealt with diabetes. I have a family history where folks have had or have diabetes. And, just growing up, I remember seeing people taking blood pressure medications and having certain health conditions, the older people around me. And I remember thinking, I never want that to be me. I don't want to have to take pills. I don't want to have to deal with amputations or insulin injections or the effects of kidney damage and dialysis. And so, and at the stage of life that I am in now, I see that many people and peers are dealing with some of these issues and far worse. And so they are preventative if we know our numbers, know what they mean, and take the meaningful and corrective steps to get our health in order. So the first one is blood glucose, which is a, a measurement of how much sugar is in our blood. Glucose or sugar is an energy, right? It's a fuel system that our bodies do need to function and operate effectively and efficiently. And when we are tested either at home with our finger sticks or in the lab where they draw blood, they can measure how much is in our blood. And so there's two measurements. One is the blood glucose. It tells you how much sugar is in your blood right now. So you can fast and take your blood sugar. You can take your blood sugar after a meal. You could take your blood sugar 3 hours after a meal, and it will tell us right now how much sugar is in our blood. But there's another test called the A1C, and that gives us a picture of how much sugar has been in our blood over a 2 to 3 month period. And why that's important is because, yes, I may fast, meaning go without food for, 8 to 12 hours, and I can get my blood sugar taken, and it could be within a normal or healthy range. But that's just a picture of right now. Over the last 3 months, though, then my blood sugar or how much sugar or glucose is in my blood could have been elevated. And so the finger stick test that we may do at home, that's effective and that can be useful. The lab draw of the blood for a glucose, that could be useful, but knowing what it is over a 2 to 3 month period can give us a broader picture beyond just that one day. And so a fasting glucose level that is normal is 70 to 99 milligrams per deciliter, right? So if you have that little finger stick kit at home, which I encourage everyone to purchase, you can have that and that will tell you what your blood sugar is like in a moment. Um, or you can have a physical with your physician and get and request an A1C test so that you can get an understanding of what your blood sugar is over a period of time. Now, there's something else on the market where people get continuous glucose monitors, and you may see that on a person's upper arm, sometimes on their leg, where maybe they have diabetes, or maybe they just want to know how what they eat impacts their blood sugar. And that's something that you can also purchase over the counter, and it's on the market so that you can get an idea of, okay, after I eat, my dinner, my blood glucose may spike, and maybe if I take a walk, that can bring it back down. Or you can know which foods have a higher glycemic index, meaning which foods we eat. So let's say I ate a tasty cake, right? I ate something sweet. My blood glucose will spike higher versus perhaps I'm eating some beans or fruit that has fiber in it, and my blood glucose may not spike as high because certain foods are have a lower glycemic index, right? So what happens when our blood glucose is elevated? And this is something that we need to know so that we understand what we can do about it. We know how a high blood glucose value can impact us over a period of time. Having too much glucose or too much sugar in our blood impacts and damages our blood vessels, impacts and damages our body organs, right? So kidney disease. Now you think about it, every part of our body has blood vessels in it. And I remember I heard a doctor describe what it's like to have too much sugar in our blood. And I thought he described it in such a descriptive way. He described the sugar in our blood like it has, imagine like little shards of glass. And that sugar is cutting or damaging our vessels. And we have vessels in our eyes and our kidneys and our heart, right? Everywhere in our body. And if we eat something that raises our blood sugar, then our organ, the pancreas, will excrete insulin. And insulin is that hormone that pushes the blood sugar out of the blood into our cells so that the sugar can be used for energy. However, if we find ourselves insulin resistant, which means our body is no longer reacting appropriately to the insulin, then that sugar is just staying in our blood, and that is measured in those lab tests that I talked about. So it is important that we understand how damaging having excess sugar in our blood, what that does to our body, what that does to our vessels, what that does to our organs, right? So diabetes and insulin resistance is something that's often experienced by people within the Black community. And, there are some symptoms. You may say, well, how would I know outside of a blood test if I have too much sugar in our blood? Well, frequent urination is a symptom. Fatigue is a symptom. Poor eyesight or your vision changing, that's a symptom. Sweet smelling breath is a symptom. I'm not saying after you eat a piece of candy, but if your breath has a sweet smell, that's also a symptom that we could have insulin resistance, diabetes, or prediabetes. And it's a sign that there's something that could be wrong. Another symptom that people experience is extreme thirst, right? You drink, and you just can't seem to quench that thirst. That's also a symptom that we could have elevated blood glucose levels. So, another thing that you hear about people experiencing, I mentioned some people have amputations because our blood vessels are impacted. Some people have to get amputations because there is a lack of blood flow or there's a neuropathy that happens in the nerves and in the tissue of our extremities. And without having proper blood flow, then if there's a sore on our toe or on our foot, it's just not going to heal properly because the blood sugar or the diabetes is impacting the body's ability to heal itself. And so sometimes you go to the doctor and there may be a sign that says, if you're diabetic, take off your shoes and your socks so that your doctor can check your feet for sores that you might not even be aware of. If you remember the movie Soul Food that had Vanessa Williams in it years ago, if you remember the scene where Big Mama was cooking at the stove and her daughter saw that her arm was near the flame and was being burned. And they had to catch it because she didn't realize it. And the nerves, the tissues, they die, right? They can't sense pain, and that was happening, and that was shown in that film, that she was being burned and she didn't feel it. And so that's why doctors say, take off your shoes because you might have a sore that you didn't even realize. And so your doctors can just look, between your toes and under the underside of your foot that you may or may not see. The doctors will find it. And so, how do we improve our blood sugar? And it's something that we can do. One way is by limiting the quantity of processed foods, ultra processed foods, foods that have a lot of ingredients in it, because these foods often have high calories, high sodium, high sugar, and little to no fiber. Fiber is important in what we eat because fiber manages the blood sugar spikes. So, as I said, let's say I went to Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts and I got a jelly donut. My blood sugar is going to jump high. Or if I was to eat beans or eat fruit that has fiber in it, a piece of wheat bread, for example, that has fiber in it, the fiber is going to moderate how much sugar is released into the bloodstream. But if I eat something that's predominantly sugar, has no fiber to blunt the impact of that sugar spike, then I can put my health in jeopardy. So it's important that we eat high fiber foods like beans, like fresh vegetables, like fresh fruit. And we eat those foods that have high fiber. And if you think about it, they're much more filling than, say, a bag of potato chips, right? Lay's, you can't eat just one. You can eat 3 bags of potato chips but not feel, quote, full, but you can eat an apple or 2. And you can say, I have no room for a third because that fiber takes up so much space and it's so much better for us. And getting sugar from fruit is so much better than getting added sugar in some of these processed foods, right? So eating less processed foods and eating more whole foods. What is a whole food? I mentioned an apple, celery, beans, foods that haven't come from a corporate factory and is manufactured into something that can sit on a store shelf for years, right? Cheese it. They're ultra processed foods, right? But let's say I ate a salad, right? And so I have lettuce in there, I have tomatoes, cucumbers, maybe I have some raisins or dates in there, onions in there. I like celery in my salads. Maybe, I'll toss in maybe some olives, right? Now, those are whole foods. Now you could say, well, the olive was processed because it was picked and canned, but it's still minimally processed versus what you get when you read the label of some of these foods that can have, a multi-year shelf life, right? When I go to the store and I buy broccoli, there's no label on it that lets me know it's broccoli. It's broccoli. I can see it. When I eat garlic, it's garlic. I can see it. I don't need a label on it. But if we find foods that have labels that have 5, 6, 12, 20 ingredients, now we're going into dangerous territory. And those are ultra processed foods, and ultra processed foods are not good for us. So sometimes it's important that no, it's not sometimes. It is always important that we read the food labels because we may say, I'm going to minimize my sugar intake. I'm going to be conscientious about how much sugar I eat. And so food companies are so devilish and they know that people are getting smart and they're learning what is good for them and what's not good for them. So now they're marketing no sugar added foods, right? But maybe there's sucralose in it. Maybe it says high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup solids. Maybe it says aspartame, agave, sorbose, let's see, fructose, evaporated cane syrup. But it may say no sugar added, right? So it might not be cane sugar, table sugar, but there's so many. There's over 50 different names for sugar. And so if we don't know what to look for, then even with the best of intentions, we could be making a choice that we really didn't want to make. I mean, there's simple ways. Like, for example, if you stop drinking sodas, stop drinking juices. I mean, even if we juice an orange, right? The orange by itself has the fiber in it, it has the juice in it, and yes, it has the sugar in it, but it's intact. But if we squeeze all of the juice out of the orange, now we're just drinking the sugar without the fiber. And so sometimes if you drink a glass of orange juice, then you may feel it yourself. I can feel if I drink orange juice, I can feel my blood sugar jump, right? But if I eat an orange or if I eat an apple, if I eat a mango, I don't feel that blood sugar spike in the same way. So it's important that we eat our fruits whole and read food labels. What else can we do to help our blood sugar? Is we can move, walking, taking a bike ride. And listen, I'm not talking about I want you to go out there and be a gym rat. No, no, no. Doing something as simple as walking after a meal, right? Because our muscles are going to need fuel to move, right? And so why not use the sugar that we just ate and let our muscles use that fuel to move? And our muscles are now using the sugar instead of the sugar just hanging out in our blood, right? And let's say maybe the weather's bad, you can't go for a walk, right? You can do some squats. You can do some toe raises. I mean, they're really simple things. We don't have to be a gym rat. We don't have to have a gym membership to be healthy. There are simple things that we can do around our houses, our homes, and we can make it fun. You can just, if you have steps in your house, you can just step up your steps for 5 minutes, right? Use that sugar so it's not just sitting in our blood, contributing to our health issues. And what's interesting, you're going to hear the same recommendations being made as I just reviewed for our blood sugar, what we can do to help ourselves become healthier. The same thing is going to be when I review cholesterol, when I review our weight, and when I review our blood pressure. These are simple things that we can do to help ourselves get healthier if that's our goal, or stay healthy if that's our goal. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode or watching this episode of Nurah Speaks. I want you to subscribe if you think that what's shared here on this podcast is useful, is helpful. Share it with others. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment, leave a rating or a review. I appreciate your time. It is valuable. There's so much pulling for our attention. So when you listen or watch Nurah Speaks podcast, that means so much to me. Thank you again. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Nurah Speaks. Look out for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, you can visit my website, NurahSpeaks.com. Or if you have a listener question, you can email me at Nurah@NurahSpeaks.com. You can also follow Nurah Speaks on X, Instagram, and Facebook at Nurah Speaks. I will be sure to include links in the show notes. If Nurah Speaks has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.